Welcome everyone to episode 92 of the Gully Blanchard podcast. My name is Ryan Anderson, coming to you from the continent of California. It is the New Year's Eve. We are out here on a Sunday morning. It is pretty chilly out for California standards, so it's about in the 40s. But other than that, it's going to be a good day today. We're getting ready to head into 2019. Want to do a couple episodes to kind of recap the good year that it was, talk about pro wrestling, things of that nature, but we'll do some housekeeping here momentarily. You can follow me on Twitter at Gully Blanchard, which is Gullyblanchard. You can check out all now 92 episodes of the podcast by searching Gully Blanchard on Spotify, iTunes, Google Play. Pretty much anywhere you get podcasts is where you're going to find us. You can also check out some of the wrestling writing I do from time and again at nocoastbias.com. Shout out to Derek. You can check out the frequent Sacramento Kings writing I do at royalpain.com. Rafe and Jonathan do a lot of good work over there covering my hometown Sacramento Kings. We're finally fun again, so it makes it fun to watch them. This used to be a one-person podcast. It wasn't very good, so I brought in two of my best friends. We had a lot of fun for about 30 or 40 episodes talking about the more important things in life, like how to build a proper gingerbread house, sports topics, wrestling topics, all kinds of stuff. So like three guys in our mid-30s, that got really hard to get us all in the same room for an hour because, you know, life happens. So I went back to doing a one-person show. Wanted to talk to interesting people that I interact with on social media, whether that be about wrestling, sports, or what have you. Generally, the past couple episodes have been real wrestling-centric. This one's going to be the same. And we're going to talk about pro wrestling. So without further ado, I want to bring in my guest. It's a guy I wanted to talk to for a while. We've gone back and forth. He does a lot of work with the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. That's going to be a tongue twister here. But Tyler Batiste, man, welcome into the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. So I know you do some work in Pittsburgh, but where can people check you out? What do you do for the Post-Gazette? How can people keep in touch with you?
Yeah, so I'm the I run the sports department here at the Post-Gazette in Pittsburgh. You can check out all of the great stuff that our staff does at postgazette.com, and there's a hyphen in the middle of posting Gazette there, so that's always key to tell people. And you can also follow me on Twitter at Ty Batiste, which is TYBATISTE, and it's a lot of Pittsburgh sports, a lot of LSU sports, and a lot of pro wrestling. That probably makes up about 90% of what I do on social media. So. But yeah, it's always fun to interact with people and meet new people through, who might be, around the corner or thousands of miles away. It's one of the great things about social media.
Absolutely. I think especially now in 2018, there with wrestling being as diverse and as so many different platforms that you can find whatever kind of wrestling you're interested in. You can always kind of find people that like some of the same stuff you like. And that's the cool thing about social media. If you want to get into a certain topic or you want to interact with some people, you can always follow them. And if you can pretty much control your news feed. It's something that I think is underrated with social media because you always have a lot of people who are complaining about this or that. And, for me, I like to follow people that I find interesting about topics I like to find interesting. And this podcast is generally an extension of that.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's weird. There are people who I consider friends now who I've met maybe once, you know what I mean? But we're always going back and forth on social media, or they're friends of another close friend of mine, and you meet one time at a wedding or something, and you become close friends just because you tweet at someone or you share the same love for wrestling or a certain professional team. It's crazy, man. Social media does have its downside, but that's definitely not one of it. It kind of breaks the wall down, and you feel like you're close friends with someone who lives on the other side of the country or sometimes the other side of the world. It's great.
Yeah, absolutely. So I wanted to ask you, how did you first get into pro wrestling? Was it something you found out as like a kid or something as an adult? What were some of your earliest memories?
Yeah, I mean, I really think it was something that happened as a kid. I have an uncle of mine who we used to Monday nights is when he would actually just come over, and my dad's side of the family is pretty big. He's one of 9, and I had an uncle at the time who was just kind of like the cool uncle that he didn't have any kids of his own, but he would always make a day every week or two to kind of hang out with his nieces or nephews, and you know, it just happened that the night that he would usually stop by, our house was Monday. And of course, as a kid, I'm 31, so Nitro started when I was about 8 or so. So that's right when, right when I was getting into pro wrestling, and it just worked out that we go back and forth between Raw and Nitro, and I practice stupid wrestling moves on my 6'3" uncle, and it just kind of grew from there. And it's just something that I've grown to love and appreciate as I've gotten older. Just kind of the not only the athletic ability that it takes, but the entertainment value, the whole production aspect of what goes on, and it's just something that I don't think I'll ever uh grow out of, so to speak.
Yeah, that's something kind of similar with me. Like I grew up, I'll be 35 in March. Now some of my earliest memories are watching like Saturday night's main event, but some of like as a teenager and a preteen, like I remember those Monday nights, those used to be appointment viewing. Like every Monday night at 8 o'clock, you had to be in front of the TV at Nitro or Raw. And it always felt like you were either on one side of that or the other. There was the era where Nitro was really good and Raw was
Yeah.
kind of struggling. And then it got flipped around WrestleMania 14 and it just took off from there. But what do you remember watching much of like the NWO form and all that, or because I know that's right around a couple years after Nitro started.
Yeah, no, I do. I think you know, and I don't know if this was a product of like my parents and my uncle, making sure I didn't see anything that I maybe shouldn't have been seeing when I was 9 years old or something. But got Nitro was kind of the more WCW was kind of the more family friendly brand, especially going into like 97, 98 in that era. There was Sunny and Sable and women like that in WWF that WCW didn't really have, and also being from the South, I'm grew up in Louisiana, so it was more of a kind of a thing there where I guess we were just kind of uh, tied to WCW because it was like the southern based promotion or something. I don't know. It's a good question.
Okay.
I have to ask my uncle that why he didn't let me watch as much WWF as I probably should have, or maybe I wanted to when I was a kid. I don't really have specific memories of that, but yeah, I remember the NWO starting to form, and I distinctly remember watching like Nash, I'm sorry, Hall, like show up on the the set of Nitro and being like, oh, that's Razor Ramon. What's going on? Like that something's weird. Like, yeah, and I guess that's kind of what hooked me and millions of other people in, just knowing that that's something that you weren't used to seeing. It was exciting. It was a pretty fun summer, and then of course Hogan, like taking it to the next level at Bash in the Beach was just great.
Yeah, what's funny is I've talked to other people either on the podcast or either in real life or on the podcast that are from that southern area, like the Georgias, Louisianas, even from Tennessee, and they said they all kind of have that same opinion where they kind of have that tie or that equity built in WCW. And I don't know if it's because of the NWA being on TBS as a child. Like I know we got WCW Saturday night where I lived in California at 3:05. I know you guys got it at 6:05. But for
Yeah.
a lot of people, that was sort of their introduction to pro wrestling. And I always think it's interesting because pro wrestling, especially WWF, WCW at the time, they were on both channels where I grew up. And I know there were some that only got WWF and there were some that only got WCW. So they always have that equity built in those companies before the Monday Night Wars. It kind of sounds like that might have been something that happened for you.
Yeah, I mean, I remember, WCW also used to have like the like what was it called, Worldwide or something? You
Mhm.
remember that?
Yeah, I remember Worldwide. Yeah.
Yeah, like I kind of remember that too, and I do think it was part of it. Like South Louisiana was old Mid South territory, and you maybe didn't have as many like hardcore wrestling fans, but before in the '80s and stuff, you kind of, even if you didn't like wrestling, you were aware of what it was, and uh how popular it was for in certain aspects. And I think that since a lot of those names and people who were involved in like the whole smaller territories kind of ended up toward WCW, it was just kind of a natural transition to like have that be like the primary, you know, brand in my household, so to speak. But saying all that, I definitely flip back and forth between the two whenever I could. And um, obviously as you get older, you kind of gravitate towards certain wrestlers or certain types of matches or whatever the case may be, and you just kind of go from there. Now, unfortunately, we don't there's not as hard of a competition between two big brands now. But man, it was fun when you were like 10 or 11, especially like going to school. If you were a WCW person and you met with, hung out with somebody who was a real big WWF kid, then you just argue about what was better and who was the better champion and all that stuff. And I'm getting nostalgic just thinking about it.
Now, growing up, because I know a lot of people that were in the WCW camp, they kind of lean towards Ric Flair over Hulk Hogan. Did you have a preference growing up as a kid, or did that change as an adult? As far as like, because those are arguably the two top draws of both territories for quite a while. I think until the mid to late '90s when Austin exploded and the NWO exploded. But those were two of the main stalwarts in both those companies. Did you have a preference as a kid?
I think I'd probably lean toward as a kid probably Hogan, but now that I appreciate it a little more, probably a little more Flair. Mm-hmm. But you got to remember too, like the time, being 31, when Hogan came to WCW, I was like 7 maybe. So like I don't have a whole lot of like specific memories of like his peak in WWF. I kind of remember him coming into WCW and like obviously knowing that he was like, he was a pretty popular wrestler because like the name Hulk Hogan and like commercials and and movies that he was in and stuff like that. But like I kind of just missed out on like his, the high point of his WWF career. So probably as a kid, just because of the NWO was so cool and like something different, I kind of leaned toward Hogan, but like I got older and kind of appreciated, just everything that Ric Flair brought to it, not just in-ring ability, but just like his promo cutting and just like the catchphrases and all that stuff. I definitely say I lean more Flair now. But I tell you, as a kid, I really, really loved the Macho Man. Was probably one of my favorite wrestlers.
He was so
right when I got started in wrestling.
Yeah, there was something that was captivating about him. About every match he had, whether it would be like a great match in WCW or early WWF years, or even just like a slower style, like 10 to 15 minute match. I think everything he did until about 99 or 2000, everything he did in the ring was captivating.
Yeah, and he really he had like a really good feud when he was like feuding with Diamond Dallas Page, like in WCW, which was kind of some of the best, probably one of the best feuds that the company had that year. Everything obviously was like NWO focused, but those two had some pretty good matches. That was kind of when like Page started to like take off as well. And I think this is kind of weird, but like I remember as a kid like distinct like going to buy Slim Jims because like Macho Man like it was endorsing Slim Jim like beef jerky. Like I'm not even like a big beef jerky fan or whatever, but I was like, well, Macho Man says it's good, so
yeah, it's got to be good.
I gotta eat it. Yeah.
What's funny is even now, like you go to gas stations or supermarkets and you'll see the Slim Jim, and I don't know if it's like just a wrestling fan in me, but anytime I see anything for Slim Jim, I always think of Savage. Like I could be at a gas station like trying to get something inside, and I walk past the Slim Jim, and I'm like, oh, that's Macho Man. Then in your head, you're always like, oh, step into a Slim Jim, brother. Yeah. Like. You can say it out loud, you can say it to yourself, but if you say it out loud and someone else hears you and they get it, it's kind of like this weird connection where you're like, oh, you know what that means too.
Yeah. No, I mean, like he really did, like in terms of like the history of wrestling, he's kind of, almost underrated, so to speak. Like he crossed like, obviously nothing to the level of like John Cena or The Rock or anybody, but like those Slim Jim commercials were pretty big, and he was so flamboyant, and he had like the the things hanging from his jacket, and he'd wear like pink and green or whatever the colors may be. And I think, again, even if you don't know what wrestling is or you're not a wrestling fan, you know who the Macho Man was mainly because of those commercials. And it just like, just was greater exposure for professional wrestling and for himself as well. And yeah, to this day, I think if there's a certain segment of people, if you're a certain age and you hear someone say snap into a Slim Jim, that you think, ooh, yeah,
Yeah, like the eyebrows perk up. You kind of do the thing, the twirl that Macho Man would do. It's universal. It's a universal sign for Slim Jims. I think even to this day, no matter who else endorses it, Slim Jims are always going to be the Macho Man thing.
I don't even know. Does anyone endorse Slim Jim now?
To me, it'll always be Macho Man. I don't care who does it. I honestly have no idea who does it now, but it's always going to be Macho Man, and then whoever else comes after is always going to be compared to him, fair or not.
No, yeah, I 100% agree.
So what as we all get into adulthood, it's something to where a lot of fans that I talk to will say that I loved wrestling as a kid, and I kind of got older and fell out of love with it. And there are a certain segment of people that still love it to this day for the entertainment standpoint. But as someone who's 31 years old, I'm 35, or I'll be 35 in a couple months. What keeps you invested in pro wrestling? Like what transitioned it from that adolescent love for it to now being an adult and still following it as a fan?
I think working in sports and loving sports and I'm not gonna, I don't want to pretend like professional wrestling is the same thing as professional football or basketball, but I think you appreciate, or at least I appreciate, the athletic ability that it takes to go out and do what they do 4 or 5 nights a week. Like it could be predetermined and the outcomes are already decided before they go out there and perform, but you just can't take someone off the street and get them to do a phenomenal forearm like AJ Styles and balance themselves on the ropes and be able to flip and things like that. Like that there's a level of skill that is involved in it. And I think as I got older, I kind of appreciated that more. Appreciated the different, not only skill levels, but the different body types of the performers. Like you have, someone like Vader who's like doing moonsaults off the
Mm-hmm.
top rope at 420 pounds or whatever the case may be, and then you have someone like Rey Mysterio who's doing even more flips at 170 and 5'8". You know what I mean? Just like the different body types of the performers and how they all the training that goes into it. I think that really kept me invested and made me appreciate that it's not easy to just get into a wrestling ring and like learn how to fall over the course of a week and um and call yourself a professional wrestler. I'm also like really like the production aspect of what they do. It's hard to put together like 5 hours of TV every week or
Yeah.
put together a 15-minute match and have the spots either called ahead of time or just like calling it in the ring. Like I like the piecing together of things and seeing the final product, not necessarily what the outcome is, but like how it all comes together. Um, like that just kind of fascinates me. I wish I knew a little more about like the writing process and like how ideas are pitched and how Raw or SmackDown is like produced on a weekly basis, because that stuff just kind of fascinates me, not only in wrestling but like work wise as well. I mean, I think that's kind of why I like gravitated toward trying to be more of an editor as opposed to like a writer, just because I like to see how everything comes together and get the final product. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, those two things definitely been what kept me involved as I got older and got into adulthood.
Yeah, I think that's one thing about pro wrestling that, you talk to a lot of adults, who are in their 30s. We all kind of understand, in a sense, what we're watching. But I think as we all get older, we have a different appreciation for what it takes to go out there,
Yeah.
night after night, 5 days a week. These guys and girls are on the road 300 days a year, driving from town to town, and they look like guys and girls that are about to step on like a bodybuilding show. Like if you look at, a guy like even a John Cena, he's the first name that comes to mind, but like to stay in the kind of shape that he stays in year round, that in itself to me is phenomenal. Or a guy like Seth Rollins or Cesaro or someone like Bayley, like the amount of dedication, if you just take that alone year round and you tell someone like, hey, you're going to have to drive across the country, you're going to have to find a gym, you're going to have to find healthy food, you're going to have to be able to do all of that and stay in shape. To have to do that year round in itself and flying across the country and flying across the world, essentially, that in itself is a challenge. And then to go, on TV, you're telling a story. And the thing that always interests me is, as I get older as a kid, is we all in our head are somewhat fantasy bookers, as much as, we all kind of have our way that we like to see things be done. But how every move or how every promo or every match can, you're trying to find this story within what they're trying to tell. And sometimes you find it and sometimes it goes in an entirely different direction. But that's one thing about wrestling to me that's so much fun, is that, you kind of get lost in like, okay, what story are they telling? Like, are they trying to go with this wrestler or trying to go with that wrestler? And we all kind of make our opinions based off that. And it's always something that as you get older, you have a different appreciation for the fact that these guys and girls are still superheroes in a sense, but they're also the age of our peers, and they're entertaining us on a weekly basis, and we're just trying to figure out what each part of it means, and how one thing that a certain wrestler does can help make another wrestler better. I think as a kid, I didn't necessarily understand that. I didn't understand the value of, say, like an Arn Anderson or a Steven Regal. I was like, oh, that guy seems to lose a lot. Like, I wonder why that is.
Yeah.
But then you get older as a kid, and like you watch maybe some of it back on the network, and you're like, oh, Arn Anderson was there because he wanted to help make this newer wrestler look good. And you kind of have a different appreciation for what these guys and girls do.
Yeah, no, you to bring up, like, to go back to your point about like the staying in shape and stuff, and keeping your body where it needs to be. I remember, coincidentally, I think it might have been like flying back from a WrestleMania, if I'm not mistaken, and my buddy and I saw Rob Van Dam in the airport, and we were like, oh, he's like a little shorter than I anticipated, but he's still like, from a physical standpoint, you could tell he's something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And this is, a few years after he like was, Rob Van, obviously not like the Rob Van Dam of like Intercontinental Champion or ECW Rob Van Dam. Like, he's obviously a bit older, but like, I remember thinking, like, having that exact thought of like, man, he's still like in really good shape, even though he's not like, I don't see him on a Raw or SmackDown every week, and just like thinking about the stuff that goes in especially when you're in your 40s, like, to keep your body where it needs to be, which I'm sure is a lot different than when you're like 22.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure I'll find that out in like a few years, but.
Now, what Mania did you go to? What Mania did you see him at afterwards?
I'm trying to think. I've been to 3 Manias, and I'm pretty sure this one was like the one in Dallas. I think it was the Dallas airport, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, that was 32, if I'm not mistaken. Was that Triple H and Roman?
That was 1 year where like everyone was injured.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. But in the I'm pretty sure it was the Dallas airport, because I seem to remember there was like a Whataburger there, which is like a very like Dallas thing.
Yes, it is.
Because I was like I was eating at Whataburger and like saw he was like in the gift shop or something, and I didn't want to like go up and like try to get a picture or anything, but I just told my buddy, I was like, I think that's Rob Van Dam, and we just like kind of walked past him. He's like, man, he's still like, he could very easily kick both our like if he wanted to, even though he's shorter.
Yes.
I'm pretty sure it was 32. I'm like 95% sure of that.
Yeah, because I remember like I went to Royal Rumble 2013, and that was the year where it was CM Punk against The Rock in Phoenix, and I was living in Las Vegas at the time. Mm-hmm. And I remember driving back from Phoenix to Vegas, and for those who don't know, it's about a 4-hour drive. Once you kind of get out of Phoenix, there's a real small town called Wickenburg, Arizona, and then you're pretty much just riding through the desert until you get back to Hoover Dam. But me and my buddy stopped at a gas station to get gas before we got pretty much on the road. And right then and there, we saw Jericho and we saw The Miz just stopping at a gas station there to get gas. And, they were both like really cool and really nice and really interested in the show. And we both, like, one of the biggest takeaways we took away from it as we got back in the car was like, those guys just seem like they don't seem as big on TV. Like Miz isn't really someone who's going to strike you with, his the way his body is shaped on that, even now on TV. And I don't think that was really ever his calling point, but I do think, seeing him live in person, you get a different understanding of like, he's a bigger guy. And then to keep that frame up year round, even as someone who doesn't look like he's going to wow you, with his physique, just to have to do that year round while you're traveling across the world is something I have a great deal of appreciation for.
Yeah, even like Rey Mysterio, like somebody like Rey Mysterio or some of the cruiserweights are just like, like they're closer to my size and height than like, Roman Reigns, like, or like they just look so small in comparison sometimes. And they're super athletic and super talented, but it's just like a weird thing to look at. Like, oh yeah, that guy's a cruiserweight, but he's probably like 5'10" and right around 200 pounds, which is about what I am, maybe like an inch shorter. And it's like, oh, that's what I would look like if I were in the ring. That's great that they were like just see him at a gas station and them being kind of cool like that. That's awesome. I got stuck behind I went to 30 WrestleMania 30 in New Orleans, and we were stuck behind. We were leaving, and I guess like either it was during like Cesaro and Jack Swagger were like in the tag team at that point, like with
that was like the Real Americans with Zeb Colter.
Yeah. And they like I can't can't remember if they had like a match on the pre-show or just like an early match, but I guess they watched the rest of the show like from a suite, and so like they were leaving their suite while like we were exiting the building, like going down the steps, and they just like towered over everyone else.
Yeah.
It's like very obvious that they're people, they're important somehow.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, being WrestleMania, you kind of knew that they were wrestlers, but even if they were like leaving like a football game or something, you would be able to tell that like they do something that involves some sort of physicality or athletic ability.
So with you going to WrestleMania 30, I always ask, because I've had a couple people on the show that were at that card. It's one of the more interesting cards that I can remember, in a sense where there's moments at certain WrestleManias that you never really forget where you were.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if I mention that, you're going to know which one I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Put me there when the streak ended.
Yeah.
I've had a couple people on the show that were there, and I want to know, like, how was that experience for you being there as a fan? Like, what was it like leading up to it, the experience itself, and then like how did the rest of the card go for you after that, being there live?
So I was like, that was my second Mania, and it was super easy to go to because, like I said, I'm from Louisiana, so I just just crashed on a friend's. Like four of us crashed at like one guy's apartment and just came in and hung out for the weekend. I remember we were kind of like directly across from the entrance, like in the maybe 300, 400 level, like not completely in the lower level, but not in the upper level as well. So we had pretty good seats. We splurged on like being right in front of the entrance so we could see everything. And I can't remember exactly what story I was telling, but I was in the middle of, telling my friend some sort of story about another friend of ours from college or something. And Brock hit the third F5. And I just continued the story and was like, he's going to kick out. And I just kept going. And I heard like the 3 count and went like, wait, what?
Yes.
Looked at my buddy Jonathan, and I was like, was that supposed to happen? And then we started like speculating, like, was it a botch? Did something happen? Was like, is Undertaker like actually hurt? And then when like the 21-1 image like came across the screen and stuff, we were like, oh no, that's the plan. Like they broke the streak. Wow.
Yes.
Whoa, they broke the streak, and it was crazy. Everybody in my section, because like the moment is great, but the match itself is not that was not that entertaining for whatever reason. Maybe Undertaker being concussed or whatever the case may be. So like it was kind of a lull for the 20 minutes before that, and then everybody just like perked up when they realized not only that it ended, but like there was no like mistake being made or anything. Like this was the plan, and it was crazy. Like I'll never forget that moment. And then being home, we all talked about, oh, after WrestleMania, we all took off of work Monday, so we were gonna go out to a couple of our bars that we like to go to when we were in school, and get some late dinner and all that stuff. But like we literally walked to a hotel, had like Coca-Cola, and all four of us, we were like, I don't feel like having a beer or anything right now. I'm just like too distraught over what just happened. Like, I just like it was shocked by it. And so we went back home, and that was the end of that. And I remember, we went back. I think that was right around the time when the network was launching.
Yes, that was the first thing on the network.
Yeah. And so my buddy, we watched that match, or we watched the ending on the network just to see how it played out on the screen. Just to see like whether Michael Cole was like hesitant about saying anything, but like we watched it, we're like, nope, yep, that definitely was supposed to happen, because he immediately says like the streak is over or whatever the case may be. But yeah, you'll never forget that, man. That was a range of emotions over that moment, and then the next 2 hours after it.
What's funny is I remember watching it on the network. I remember like that was like the first, like I said, that was the first thing on the network. And I was living in Las Vegas, and the day before I competed in my first Spartan race. It's like an 8-mile race.
Mm-hmm.
I was not prepared for it. So running 8 miles and 30 obstacles, like my body felt like it had been in a car wreck. So I had to like force myself to get off the couch during certain parts of the day just to be able to like walk around. And I remember like the match was going on, and you're right, the match itself really wasn't that good. Mm-hmm. And I think looking back on it, it was really difficult to watch because you can kind of see where Undertaker's out on his feet in a couple spots. Like,
yeah.
a couple of those kicks and a couple of those F5s were cringeworthy in the beginning because it's like, oh, like, ooh, that doesn't look safe, or that doesn't look like healthy. And then I remember like walking around my apartment, and so I remember hearing the third F5, and I kind of had the same reaction you did. I'm like, oh, he'll kick out. Like, it's Undertaker, it's WrestleMania. Like, there's no way. Because if you remember leading up to that show, Brock really wasn't booked terribly strongly. Like, he had lost the year before at to Triple H. He wasn't exactly like the huge superstar that defeating the Streak.
That kind of like started it.
Yeah.
Like that SummerSlam after that was the one where he like destroyed Cena, right?
Yeah, that was like the rise of Brock, because leading up to it, he wasn't booked to look weak, but he definitely wasn't someone you were probably going to take as credible as you would take Brock Lesnar a couple years after. And I remember like the third F5 hit, and I'm like, okay, let me just go get something. And I heard the 3, and I just stopped in my apartment. I was like, there's no way. Like, this thing's never supposed to end, because you kind of got conditioned to what an Undertaker match at Mania was. Like, there'd be like a festival of finishes at the end. Like, I remember Punk hit his finish a couple times at 29. And, 28 and 27 were real physical matches that led you to a lot of like, I remember like, I thought the streak was over at 27 when Triple H hit the tombstone on him. And I was like, okay, that's it. And then I remember Taker kicked out. I'm like, oh, they got me there.
Yeah.
I remember the third F5, and I'm like, okay, they're not going to get me this time. And I was walking around, and I heard the 3, and I'm like, oh, whoa, they did it. Like, wow. And it was a moment. It is a moment that like you never really forget where you are and what you were doing during that event.
It's funny you say that. I had the same reaction so like coincidentally, just like coming in the course of conversation, like we brought up like the 3 WrestleManias I've been to. So the first one was 27, and they were all like in the South basically, because it's either driving distance or I know someone that, you know what I mean? Like I haven't paid to like stay at a hotel or Airbnb. It's just like crashing on someone's couches or something.
Yeah.
So the first one, the 27, the one in Atlanta, for the first Triple H, well, I guess technically the second Triple H, but the first in that back-to-back years, I remember thinking that too, of like, oh, this is it. Like there was a moment there where I was like, oh, this is going to be in the end of it, and like, oh, they got me. Never mind, it's never going to end. And then I just started thinking like later, like it would just be someone, like Roman Reigns, or like someone young up and comer like coming down and really making their mark. Not someone who was already kind of established like Brock, but I mean, it did help them push Brock even more to the moon. But it was, I'm like thinking about the moment now. It's still crazy to me, like going on 5 years later.
Yeah, my theory with them ending it there has always been like they tried to push so much with the network that they figure if they drop the Undertaker streak on the network, that if you were on the fence about subscribing, you almost had to subscribe to the network to see this. That's kind of it's always been my theory about why I thought they did it at WrestleMania 30, because that way it was going to be a good boost for the network.
Yeah, I've always wondered too, like if he were at the time, if he were thinking about calling it quits.
I think so, yeah.
And then like it's just gone back and forth like a couple times since. I mean, like he got like had whatever surgery he's had, and like the past couple matches he's had, they haven't been great, but he's looked a lot better than he did like, against Roman Reigns in that Mania a couple years ago, and where he just looked like he was completely broken down.
That one made me sad. Like I remember watching that one, and I felt the same way. And I've been an Eagles fan my entire life. We finally got the one ring. Finally,
yep, I'm same here. I'm also an Eagles fan.
Yeah. Oh, that one ring, we finally got it. But I remember watching that match, and I felt the same way I felt watching like McNabb when he was on the Vikings, and he was just like bouncing balls off the turf. And I was like, I don't want to remember him this way. Like, I want to remember the good years, and just watching him struggle through WrestleMania 33 was so difficult to watch.
Yeah. But I mean, he looked, I mean, the Cena match at this year's Mania was obviously short.
Yeah.
But like he looked old, obviously, but it was nothing compared to like that was almost like the low point for me. Like that match with Reigns was like, oh man, he needs to call it quits. It pains me to say it, but
yeah.
Now I'm like, oh, if he's healthy, like whatever, he can do for however long he wants to. He's the Undertaker. Like I'll give him the benefit of the doubt, whatever.
Yeah, I always thought they could have did more with Undertaker Cena if they'd have pulled the trigger on it like a couple years
Yeah,
beforehand.
yeah, absolutely.
Like I thought that would have been like the last really good dream match that they had, where you could have did like the last cowboy, the last outlaw thing, like going against the old cowboy going against the established one. Or there's so many different stories they could have went with, which kind of in a way disappointed me with the fact that they did 34 of those two, because it felt like there was so much more they could have done. But
They like somehow try to pull some sort of rematch at some
yeah.
point.
Yeah, I don't know if he can do a good 20-25 minute match. I think now his comfort zone is going to be, those tag teams where he can kind of hide, and it can
Yeah,
be, like the old groups from the 60s and 70s are just kind of playing their greatest hits, and you're not really
hmm
counting on them to play a good live show nowadays.
yeah. No, I agree with that. I also wondered sometimes like if Sting didn't get hurt, if they would have ever thought about doing that, like
Yeah.
doing the Sting Taker. Because I mean Sting, like from a physical standpoint, like that match with the Rollins match and like the match against Triple H, like he, you know, was in pretty good shape. Like he
Uh-huh.
wasn't lumbering around or looking as if he was like out of place there. So I don't know if he could have like carried Undertaker to a good match, but like it wouldn't be like two people who just like can't go anymore. At least Sting would be able to take a bump every now and then. I was wondering if that was always ever in the cards, but obviously that's something that'll never happen now. But
Yeah, I always thought their best spot to do that would have been WrestleMania 31 in Santa Clara. Uh,
mhm.
they ended up doing Sting, Triple H, and Undertaker, Bray, but I thought that would have been the best shot to do it there.
Yeah, and it just turned into like a huge angle, like with NWO and DX and the it was just like a gimmick match basically. That
Yeah, it was kind of like an old concert where you see like all your old, they play all the old hits and everyone comes out.
Yeah, yeah.
It was just kind of fun for nostalgia's sake. It wasn't going to be a good bell to bell match.
Yeah, and that's a good analogy, like a concert. Like if you were expecting it to be like a great live show or a great bell to bell match, then like that's your fault probably.
Yeah,
Like they're
especially
they're
yeah,
combined 100 years old. Like they weren't gonna go like a 30-minute classic like Angle and Shawn Michaels or something.
yeah, absolutely, man. So I want to get you out of here on this. What was the last thing you watched on the network?
Uh for like a full show or just like a random match that I like happen to put on.
The last thing you had on the network before we recorded the show. Could be a random match, could be the full show, but just the last thing
Uh,
that you watched.
I watched I watched Finn versus KO, the ladder match from the Takeover. Uh,
Was
what,
that Brooklyn?
maybe? Yeah, I think it was Brooklyn. Might have been the first Brooklyn.
Yeah, that was the Bailey Sasha match.
Yeah,
Yes, okay, that was on the same card. I remember that one. Yeah, that was
yeah. I watched that ladder match last night just for no real reason whatsoever, but I just started thinking about Kevin Owens and him being hurt, and I was like, oh man, he might be coming back soon. So I just like went back to watch like like a random NXT match before bed. So yeah, that was it.
man, that whole card was pretty good too. Because if I'm not mistaken, that one had Jushin Liger against like
Yeah,
Tyler Breeze
Tyler
in the
Breeze.
opener. Yeah, like that was a really fun card. They do a lot of good stuff with takeovers, especially the ones that they did this year. And with them doing takeover again in Phoenix, that doesn't leave anything to be, that's going to be an interesting card.
Yeah, have you ever been to one?
It's funny, when I moved back from Vegas, WrestleMania 31 was in Santa Clara, and at the time I was living in Sacramento, and I had a choice to go to NXT San Jose or WrestleMania 31 because I couldn't afford both at the time.
Hmm.
And I thought to myself, I was like, I don't know, like that WrestleMania 31 card doesn't look as strong as it normally does. NXT, it's got Tommy, it's got Sasha and Charlotte. I should probably go to NXT. And at the time, I was at NXT thinking I made like the best decision in the world because that thing was live.
Yeah,
It was, Sasha and Charlotte put on a great match. It was when a Tommy first hit to go to sleep and like the crowd
yeah,
erupted.
yeah, yeah.
And I remember leaving there and I'm like, oh, like okay, cool. Like I did the right thing. Like that was really smart. And then I remember watching WrestleMania 31 on my friend's couch when Rollins cashed in, and I was just like, oh, that would have been really fun to see live. But WrestleMania 31 was a lot better than I thought it was going to be. But I've been to one WrestleMania, which is WrestleMania 23. I've been to one Royal Rumble, a bunch of Raws and SmackDowns. I actually saw CM Punk's Pipe Bomb promo live and in Vegas. It was like my all time.
Oh man, that's great.
In a wrestling ring, at an event, it was my all time favorite moment because it was me and a friend of mine who's older, and him and I always talk about wrestling, and he was about our age when Hogan blew up, so he's always a really good person to bounce stuff off of.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember we sat there and we watched the promo, and we were like, there's no way that's gonna make air because Punk was talking reckless on the mic, and we were like, there's no way. Like, you figure that's something kind of like for the crowd or something like that. And we got home and everyone blew up my phone and was like, were you there for that? And I was like, yeah, that made air. And then I had to like go back on my DVR and find it and watch it. I'm like, oh wow. At the time you didn't realize it was one of the more explosive promos ever, in a sense to where like we knew it was something crazy. We just didn't think it was ever going to make air.
Yeah.
And yeah, it did. And that was probably my favorite being at a wrestling event moment I've ever had.
Oh, that's crazy, man. That's great. That's awesome.
Yeah, man. So we're going to wind this thing down, but where can people check you out on social media? This has been a really fun conversation, but I want to make sure we give you a platform to let people know where they can follow you and all the work that you do.
Yeah, absolutely. You can follow me on Twitter at Ty Batiste, which is TYBATISTE, and you can also visit postgazette.com. If you're interested in Pittsburgh sporting news, the Steelers, Penguins, Pirates, all that good stuff. Steelers have a pretty big game coming up in an hour and a half, so should be a fun day on social media and at Post Gazette's website. So yeah.
So if I'm not mistaken, the Steelers are kind of in the same spot the Eagles are in, where they need to win, and if I'm not mistaken, the Steelers need the Ravens to lose. Is that correct?
Correct. They need to win and have the Ravens lose to win the division. And then if they win and the Sunday night game ends in a tie, they'll get in as a wild card. So a couple of different scenarios, one far more likely than the other. But there's some tense folks in Pittsburgh right now. People walking around out pulling for the Browns, which is something that you don't usually get in Pittsburgh.
Especially towards the end of the year either. You're pulling for a Browns win in week 16. I almost never would have thought that would have happened anytime based on their history.
Yeah, people are. I've seen people, and I saw actually someone with an Antonio Brown jersey who just like kind of added an S to the end. It's just like they were like, I'm not gonna. They're not gonna go out and buy a Browns jersey. They'll just like adjust their current Brown jersey and say go Cleveland for like 3.5 hours today. So it'll be a fun afternoon here.
I imagine for Steeler fans, it'd be a lot easier to do that than say go Ravens, because I know that's quite the rivalry. So imagine if it was flipped and you needed like the Ravens to win. And
yeah.
That would be an odd one.
Go over too well.
Yeah. So, all right. So you guys can check out all 92 episodes of this show on iTunes, SoundCloud, Google Play, wherever you get podcasts, we are. You can follow me on Twitter at Gully Blanchard, which is GULLYBLANCHARD. All 92 episodes are available. You can also check out my wrestling writing at nocoastbias.com. And until then, we'll be back next week with another good episode. Tyler, thanks very much, man, for coming on the show. I know you've been wanting to do this for a while, so it's good to have you on, and this was a lot of fun.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. We'll do it again sometime.
Absolutely, man. Until then, you guys be good, and we'll be back next week.